Friends, today we bring you a story that will shock you, inspire you, and keep you glued to the screen until the very last second. A ruthless millionaire thought he could humiliate a poor maid in front of hundreds of guests, but he never imagined the truth she was hiding. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and tell us which country you are watching from. Your support means the world to us. And if you are new here, make sure to subscribe and click the bell icon so you never miss our powerful and emotional stories. So stay with us till the very end of this video. You won't believe how it all unfolds. Now, let's begin. The first crack of crystal sounded like a firecracker, then 4 more followed in a stuttering cascade. Champagne streamed across the Carrara marble like liquid gold, licking the tips of polished Oxfords and stilettos. Clarissa Foster froze, tray empty, breath snagged, her faded blue uniform the one dull patch in a ballroom lacquered with light. 3 years of moving like a ghost through the Zamper Tower, and tonight, New Year's Eve, Manhattan's most guarded guest list, she had become the show. 3 years? Said Leonard Zamper, voice cutting through the jazz quartet and the soft whir of drone cameras. And you're still a walking disaster. The billion-dollar developer didn't shout. He projected, the way men accustomed to being obeyed project. At his elbow, 2 Japanese investors slid their fountain pens back into identical breast pockets. Deal deferred. Heads turned. Conversations paused mid-word. The ballroom of 300 CEOs, senators, brand heiresses, a movie star on a whisper-brief hiatus, tilted its attention toward a housekeeper on her knees. Clarissa's hands shook as she gathered shards of Austrian crystal, thumbs already nicked, the sting immediate, bright. She'd learned to make herself smaller, shoulders tucked, chin down, apologies preloaded. I'm sorry, Mr. Zamper, my heel caught on the edge of the carpet. She held up the tray, an empty halo. If she could just clear the mess, the room would exhale, the world would swivel back to the power brokers comparing jets. Leonard tapped a spoon against his glass with theatrical patience. A round of applause for our exceptionally efficient cleaning crew. Laughter scattered like confetti. Not guffaws, worse, the intimate snickers people reserve for safe targets. A hedge funder filmed. A woman in silver sequins covered a grin with the rim of her flute. Clarissa kept her eyes on the floor, because eye contact made cruelty stick. The bandleader, trained to read rooms, caught Zamper's nod. The first violin slid into Por una cabeza, that famous tango every American recognizes even if they can't name it. Leonard loved this bit, the cosmopolitan flourish, the imported sophistication. He stepped off the dais and walked toward Clarissa, palms open like a benevolent judge about to grant clemency. Tell you what, he said, pitching to the back row, to the balcony cameras, to the internet he imagined already watching. Since we're discussing competence, let's turn this unfortunate spill into a teachable moment. He offered Clarissa a hand as though he might help her up. If our talented housekeeper can dance this tango with any dignity at all, I'll marry her. Tonight. A beat, perfectly timed. And I'll add $20,000 to sweeten that gamble. The room detonated, shrieks, whistles, someone actually shouted, "Take the money!" Smartphones rose like a mechanical meadow. A senator's aide whispered, "Liability," into a cuff and kept filming anyway. It was America's favorite genre, humiliation framed as opportunity. Clarissa didn't take his hand. She finished the last of the glass, set the tray upright, and slowly stood on her own. She felt the slick bite of champagne cooling on marble through the thin soles of her shoes. Something inside her, something she'd kept wrapped in cotton and silence for years, shifted its weight. "Mr. Zamper," she said, voice steady enough to make the nearest row of faces tighten. "Are you making that promise in front of all these witnesses?" A ripple of O's. Leonard's smile brightened by a single what, surprise tucked under charm. "I am. That's the offer." He turned, letting the cameras drink him in. "A very generous one." "And if I dance more than with dignity?" she asked. "If I dance well, very well, what then?" He blinked, recalibrated, let the crowd see him indulge her. "Then I marry you and pay you, as stated. We shouldn't overcomplicate a charity wager." Then I accept, Clarissa said. She bent and unbuckled her black work shoes. A murmur rose, half derision, half curiosity, as she stepped barefoot onto the cool stone. Without the shoes, her posture changed almost imperceptibly. Weight settled through the balls of her feet. Collarbones softened, wrists unfurled. The quartet found its breath. The bandoneon sighed. The bass marked the heartbeat. She closed her eyes, not to disappear but to count. 1N, 2N, slow, slow, quick, quick. Her right foot drew a clean ocho on the marble, a subtle figure eight that told every serious dancer in the room exactly what she was. She let the melody pull her left shoulder forward, allowed a half pivot to gather into a cross, then released into a traveling walk so unforced it looked like air had learned to carry a human. The laughter thinned again, then failed. Clarissa wasn't approximating tango, she was speaking it. Her adornos were subtle, an ankle brush here, a flick of toe there, choice layered on choice until a language reappeared in a room that hadn't expected grammar. She didn't perform for Leonard, or for the cameras, or for the 300 whose approval had always been rented, never given. She danced with the music the way she had learned to before life rerouted her, chest lifted, spine organized, breath riding rhythm. Leonard's grin collapsed into something harder to film. His bed had depended on physics. Humiliation accelerates in groups, shame snowballs, people flee. He hadn't accounted for craft, the way real skill could turn a jeer into a pause into the felt articulation of wrongness. Clarissa didn't chase virtuosity. No acrobatics, no showy leg whips. Instead, bass turns executed cleanly, weight transfers that landed like decisions, a cadence perfectly married to the bandoneon's plea. The room changed temperature. A publicist lowered her phone. The senator's aide stopped narrating into his sleeve. A sommelier in the back, who had once studied in Buenos Aires, whispered, "Dios mío," to no one. She finished on a simple linear close, breath measured, chest forward, gaze level. Not triumphant, present. The quartet cut the last note on a dime. Silence held for a second too long to be comfortable, then someone clapped, then another, and the applause unfurled, not the riot of a party trick, but the rough, unsettled recognition of having misjudged a person in public. Clarissa let it pass through her. She turned to Leonard. "About your wager." He tried a laugh that died halfway. "You were adequate. $20,000, she said, unblinking. "You promised. And you promised marriage if I impress you." A tremor of delighted cruelty, now turned on him, passed through the crowd. Leonard felt it land. He owned 12 towers and a minor league baseball team. He did not own this moment. "You impressed the room," he conceded, aiming for magnanimous. "The money is yours. As for marriage, let's have the finance team handle the transfer first. Cashier's checks are fine," she said. The precision of it, adult, procedural, made two CFOs in the audience smile despite themselves. He gestured to an aide, suddenly eager for errands. Cameras craned, scenting the pivot. The Japanese investors, who had watched without visible emotion, exchanged a glance that read like a memo, "The man cannot read risk." Clarissa stepped off the marble to the perimeter, accepted a glass of still water from a woman in silver sequins who now couldn't meet her eyes. Blood had beaded along the pads of Clarissa's thumbs. She pressed the rim of the glass against them to cool the sting. The quartet slid into something softer, a mercy. People approached her in ones and twos, the way they approach a painting after the gift shop has sold out of prints. "What did you learn?" someone asked. "How long have you?" another began, then lost nerve. Clarissa answered no one. She stood barefoot, spine quiet, letting the room's narrative rewire itself around her in real time. She had kept a part of herself hidden because it was the only way to keep it safe. Now it had stepped into light, and the light, to its credit, had adjusted. 20 minutes later Leonard returned with a bank envelope, heavy, official, insufficient. He extended it with a stiffness that read as punishment to himself. As promised. Clarissa counted the checks, not to needle him, but because women who clean other people's messes learn to verify the terms. She slid the envelope into the deep pocket of her uniform and looked him in the eye. Really looked, the way a leader scans a room before issuing a directive. "Thank you," she said. "You should ice your pride tonight. It's sprained." A few guests laughed, carefully, privately. Leonard opened his mouth, shut it, and the first hairline fracture in his certainty made itself known. Midnight was still an hour away. The drones drifted back toward the ceiling, reprogrammed to capture countdown confetti and not a reckoning. Clarissa padded to the service corridor to find bandages for her thumbs, shoes dangling from 2 fingers, the marble chill fading from her feet. Behind her, the party's noise resumed in a key lower than before. It would be days before the clips hit every feed, hours before the first think piece, minutes before the first text to a gossip columnist. But right now, in the thin quiet between music cues, Clarissa felt something she hadn't felt in years. The click of a door unlocking inside her own life. She did not yet know who would step through it. Only that it would be her. The bank envelopes were still warm from the printer when Leonard returned, jaw set, tuxedo immaculate, and somehow diminished. He held them out like a peace offering he didn't believe in. Clarissa counted, methodically in full view of the room, because women who mop up other people's messes learn to verify promises. When she slid the checks into the deep pocket of her uniform, the hierarchy in the room shifted half an inch. "No," Leonard said, voice tight. "Explain something to me." The band had fallen to a hush. The drones idled near the ceiling like curious moths. "How does a housekeeper dance like that?" The question, ugly in its assumptions, landed with an audible wince. Elaine Vasquez, the woman in the silver dress, stepped forward. "Leonard, stop. She already apologized for the spill." He smiled without warmth. "Elaine, that wasn't a question for you." He turned back to Clarissa. "Well?" Clarissa let the silence run long enough that those closest to the stage felt their faces heat. Then she spoke, even, measured. "I learned. I trained. Not that anyone here ever asked." A murmur rippled through the crowd, the faint, collective flinch of people realizing they had never been curious about the person who emptied their trash. Dr. Fernando Costa, CEO of Northeastern Health Partners, slid in beside Leonard, wearing the pleasant smirk of a man who buys distressed assets for sport. "Where would someone like you train?" he asked, tone honeyed and sharp. "Someone like me?" Clarissa repeated, the words turning in the air until their shape became visible to everyone. "You mean a woman who cleans your office at night?" She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. "Queens Community Dance Conservatory from 8 to 18. Scholarship to Buenos Aires, National Institute of Dance. 4 years. Then back here. Theater work. Events. Competitions." Buenos Aires did something to the room. Even those who knew Tango only from movie soundtracks understood that the city was a credential you couldn't fake. The smirk left Costa's mouth. Leonard's brows knit. "If that's true," Leonard pressed, "why are you pushing carts on my 50th floor?" Because this is America's favorite riddle, Clarissa thought, how a life can tilt, and keep tilting until the old map no longer fits. She took a breath and let the answer cut clean. "Because life happened," she said. "Meaning?" Leonard snapped. "Drugs? Gambling? What's the tragic twist?" The cruelty was naked now. An audible groan rose from somewhere near the bar. Clarissa lifted a palm. "Enough." "Meaning a drunk driver on the New Jersey Turnpike. 3 surgeries on my right leg. 1 on the hip. A year in physical therapy. I can dance to live, basic steps, clean movement, but not to compete. Not anymore." Her voice thinned at the edges only once, on the word compete, and then steadied. "My husband, Robert Andrade, died on impact." The ballroom exhaled like a single organism. Elaine covered her mouth. A senator lowered his gaze to his shoes. Costa looked at the floor and, to his credit, stayed there. "I lost my place in the company," Clarissa continued, not to elicit pity but to finish the math. "Sold the car. Sold the apartment. Taught when I could, but studios want demonstration, not description. Tried choreography, But the market is crowded with healthy bodies. The cleaning contract paid weekly and in full. I took it. She looked around, at faces she had memorized as silhouettes, at hands she had known only by the weight of their discarded glasses. For 3 years I have been dependable, invisible, and, despite tonight, competent. No one moved. And then, as if the floor itself had shifted, the posture of the room changed. Heads that had tilted to appraise now tilted to listen. Leonard's certainty, polished, practiced, sprouted hairline cracks. Why didn't you tell anyone? Someone blurted from the second row. Why not, brag? Because you didn't want to know, Clarissa said, not unkindly. Because you prefer your service workers simple, nameless, interchangeable, grateful. Complexity interrupts your dinner. It wasn't a speech so much as a mirror. People looked and saw themselves, and it stung. Costa found his voice first. Ms. Foster, he said, quieter. I was wrong to imply background equals destiny. It rarely does, she said. But it does inform the cost of your jokes. Leonard, who had been studying her as if she were a hostile witness, forced a smile back onto his face. All right, he said too brightly. The morality play is touching. You won the money, you startled the room. We'll call it even. Even? Clarissa repeated. You promised marriage, remember. A surf of uneasy laughter, this one turned toward him. He felt it land and flushed a human shade he hadn't worn in years. A gentleman doesn't marry out of spectacle, he said, groping for dignity. We'll consider the joke closed. Then let's consider the wager half paid, Clarissa said. The rest will take something you don't yet have. What's that? Change. The word hung there, small, precise, and somehow heavier than the chandelier above them. Phones buzzed in pockets as the first clips hit feeds. Caption drafts wrote themselves in 1,000 thumbs. The janitor who outdanced a millionaire. The most elegant revenge ever filmed. But inside the hall, it wasn't revenge that held them. It was recalibration. The way skill rearranges a room. The way grief sharpened into boundary. A server approached with a first aid kit. Elaine took it, and without ceremony, cleaned the tiny glass cuts on Clarissa's thumbs. I'm Elaine, she said softly. I should have stopped him earlier. You did now, Clarissa replied. The antiseptic stung a little, then cooled. By the time midnight glittered down in a snow of confetti, the gala had snapped back into its choreography. The investors reconvened. The publicists rebuilt talking points. The drones resumed their scripted arcs. But the center of gravity was different, and everyone could feel it. At 12:17 a.m., when the elevators finally disgorged the last of the glitterati onto Lexington Avenue, a text from an assistant producer at a late-night show pinged Leonard's phone. You're trending. Not in the way you like. On the service level, Clarissa tied her shoes, pocketed a spare bandage, and clocked out. The night manager, who had never before used her name, looked up. Good night, Ms. Foster. Outside, Manhattan's cold but clean. She pulled her coat tight, the bank envelope solid against her hip, and started the long walk to the subway, bare skin in her shoes reminding her of the feel of marble, of a language she had spoken again, properly, if only for 3 minutes. Somewhere between third and second, a thought presented itself without fanfare, the way a door clicks and you realize it's been unlocked the whole time. They saw you. Not all of them, not completely. But enough to make what came next possible. And, next, Clarissa understood as she descended into the warm, tired light of the platform, would be the real story, not the viral clip, not the money, not the dare, but what a man like Leonard Zamper might do when the mirror refused to look away. The first headlines broke before sunrise. By 6 a.m., Clarissa's phone, an outdated model with a cracked corner, buzzed with messages she didn't answer. Housekeeper humiliates millionaire with perfect tango. From mop to masterpiece, viral moment freezes New York elite. The clips spread across social feeds like wildfire, slowed, replayed, analyzed. Commentators parsed her posture, her poise, the way she had counted the steps with her eyes closed. Clarissa ignored all of it. She spent the morning as she always did, walking 6 blocks from her shared apartment to the corner diner, ordering the cheapest breakfast special, black coffee, 2 eggs, and reading the classifieds she didn't believe in. The envelope of cashier's checks sat in her purse like a stone. $20,000. More than she had seen in one place since before the accident. By noon, reporters had found her building. The landlady buzzed her room. "Miss Foster, there's media." Clarissa stayed inside. She'd spent 3 years invisible. She could endure a few days hiding. But inside, under the armor of caution, something else simmered, a tremor of possibility. Across town, Leonard Zamper's world tilted in the opposite direction. His PR team barricaded his office, filtering calls, coaching language. The investors from Tokyo had flown back unsettled, muttering about lack of discipline. Board members demanded explanations. It was a joke, Leonard repeated to anyone who would listen. But the clip, looping endlessly, watched by millions, made it clear it hadn't been funny. By the second day, Clarissa's anonymity collapsed. She left her apartment for groceries and found a teenager aiming a phone at her. "Are you the Tango lady?" he asked, voice cracking with awe. A group of college students on the corner clapped as she walked by, shouting, "You showed him!" The sudden visibility unnerved her. It also sparked a warmth she hadn't expected. For years she had been unseen, disposable. Now strangers looked at her with respect, curiosity, even pride. That night, in the staff locker room of Zamper Tower, other cleaners approached her differently. Ramon, who never spoke more than a nod, squeezed her shoulder and whispered, "We're proud." Maria, the youngest on the crew, eyes shining, asked, "You really studied in Buenos Aires?" Clarissa nodded. For the first time, the others saw not just a colleague but a possibility. Leonard, meanwhile, couldn't sleep. 3 nights of tossing in penthouse sheets, haunted not by humiliation alone but by memory, the precision of her steps, the way her voice had steadied when she said life happened. He thought about his parents, his father, a mason, his mother, a housekeeper, and the promises he had once made as a boy never to belittle people who labored. Somewhere along the climb, he had broken those promises. Clarissa had forced him to see it. On the 4th evening, Clarissa arrived for her shift and was intercepted before she could punch in. Joanna Santos, head of HR, waited in the lobby with urgent eyes. "Mr. Zamper wants to see you. Tonight." Clarissa blinked. "Now?" "No," Joanna confirmed. "He's been in his office since yesterday. Barely eating. Won't leave until he speaks with you." Clarissa considered leaving, walking straight back into the night. But a strange calm settled over her. She no longer felt like prey. She had leverage. She followed Joanna through glass corridors she usually polished, now lit for a different purpose. When the double doors of Leonard's office opened, the sight startled her. He wasn't the polished emperor of the gala. His tie was gone, shirt wrinkled, hair uncombed. Papers littered his desk. He looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "Clarissa," he said hoarsely, almost relieved. "Thank you for coming." She didn't sit until he gestured. She crossed her legs deliberately, hands folded, posture steady. If he wanted to talk, it would be on equal ground. "I can't stop thinking about what you said," he began. "About the accident. About what I've been blind to. I thought I respected people. But you showed me. I've become exactly what I hated." Clarissa studied him. "Recognition is the first step," she said quietly. "But words don't erase 3 years of contempt." "I know," Leonard admitted. He stood, paced to the window, looked out at the Manhattan skyline. "That's why I'm making you an offer. A real job. Not cleaning. Not outsourced. I want you to be the cultural coordinator of Zamper Enterprises." The words landed like a stone in still water. Clarissa's brows lifted, but her voice stayed even. "Why?" "Because you have discipline," Leonard said. "Skill. Presence. The way you carried yourself on that floor, it takes years of training, focus, dedication. Anyone who can master one art can learn another. I need that here." Clarissa leaned back, considering. The offer was tempting: salary triple her current pay, benefits, stability. But she heard the shadow behind it too: guilt, maybe pity. She wasn't interested in charity. "You're doing this because you feel guilty," she said flatly. "Yes," Leonard confessed. "But also because I finally see you. For 3 years you've been in the wrong role. I want to correct that." Clarissa let silence stretch until it pricked. Then she leaned forward, eyes unwavering. "If I accept, it won't be out of gratitude. It will be because I deserve it. And if you ever humiliate me again, I'll leave, and tell the world how you treat your people." Leonard swallowed hard. "Understood. One more condition," she added. "This change can't be just for me. Every janitor, guard, caterer, driver, everyone invisible in your empire, deserves respect. Monthly meetings. Open forums. Better uniforms. You will know their names." The demand startled him. It also struck something deep. He realized how rarely he'd looked his workers in the eye. "If you help me build it, yes," he said. Clarissa extended her hand. He took it. For the first time, Leonard felt not like a man offering charity, but like a man negotiating with an equal. When Clarissa left his office that night, she carried not just a new contract but something weightier: the first flicker of power. For years, she had been invisible. Now, she was becoming the mirror through which an empire would be forced to look at itself. 3 weeks later, Zamper Enterprises no longer felt like the same company. Where once the skyscraper's service floors had been silent, full of shuffling feet and eyes lowered to the ground, there was now chatter, introductions, even laughter. The first staff forum had been Clarissa's idea, and she had insisted that Leonard himself attend. It had been awkward at first. Guards in worn uniforms shifted nervously in their seats, janitors clutched paper cups of coffee, unsure if this was a trap. But Clarissa stood at the front, hair tied back, her voice calm and firm. "You all have a voice," she said. "You deserve to be heard. This company cannot function without you, and from now on, it will listen." Leonard sat beside her, not at the head of the table. When Jose, a night guard, raised his hand and quietly explained that their uniforms were torn and embarrassing, Leonard leaned forward and asked, "How many do you need?" Jose blinked, stunned. 12 sets, sir." Leonard nodded. "You'll have them by Monday." The man's eyes watered. The room shifted. Other voices followed. A cleaner asked for better lighting in the underground parking. A cafeteria worker requested stronger coffee for the night shifts. A mechanic suggested new tools to speed repairs. None of the requests were extravagant. All were things Leonard had never noticed, because he had never looked. Afterward, Leonard pulled Clarissa aside. "You've changed the air in this building," he admitted. She shook her head. "I didn't change it. They did. I only gave them permission." The forums became monthly. Within 2 months, turnover dropped by nearly half. Workers who had once slipped out quietly at the end of shifts now stayed to chat. Productivity reports climbed. For the first time in years, Zamper Enterprises was on the best places to work survey shortlist. But outside the company walls, the narrative twisted. A gossip columnist published a poisonous article: "Millionaire hires former mistress as cultural coordinator." The story framed Clarissa as a manipulative seductress, claiming she had danced her way into Leonard's favor. Grainy screenshots of her barefoot tango circled online, accompanied by mocking captions. Clarissa read the article alone in her small apartment. Her hands trembled, but not from shame, from fury. After everything, she thought, they still want to reduce me to a scandal. By morning, the rumor had spread across social media, threatening to undo months of progress. Joanna Santos rushed into Clarissa's new office, panic in her eyes. "What do we do? Should we wait until it blows over?" "No," Clarissa said firmly. "We face it head on." That afternoon, she convened an emergency assembly in the company auditorium. Every level of staff came, whispers buzzing like static. Clarissa walked to the stage in a navy blouse and black slacks, simple, elegant, no uniform. She stood tall, the spotlight harsh, but her voice clear. "You've read the article," she began. Murmurs rippled. "It claims I am here because of scandal, not because of work. Let me tell you the truth. 6 months ago, I was humiliated in front of 300 people. I danced because I refused to crawl away. I was hired into this role because I proved I have discipline, courage, and skill. And because this company needed change." The auditorium fell into stillness. Then Clarissa added something she had not planned. "But let me also admit this. Yes, something has changed between Mr. Zamper and me. Not what the article suggests. Not seduction. Respect. Mutual respect. And maybe more than that. But if I am here today, it is because I earned it." From the back, Jose stood. "She's telling the truth," he said loudly. "She fought for us. Our uniforms, our voices, our dignity. That's real." Others echoed him. "She made this place better. She listens. She changed everything." The applause began hesitant, then rolled into thunder. Clarissa's throat tightened. For the first time in years, she realized she wasn't alone in defending her worth. At that moment, Leonard walked into the hall. He strode to the stage, the crowd parting, and took the microphone. "I know who leaked that article," he said, his voice sharp with steel. "It was an enemy who wanted revenge. But they made one mistake. They underestimated Clarissa. They underestimated all of us." Then, in front of the stunned assembly, Leonard turned to her. His hand shook slightly as he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. He dropped to one knee. Gasps erupted across the hall. "Clarissa Foster," he said, his voice breaking but steady. "You've changed me, my company, my life. You showed me that true strength is not in wealth or status, but in dignity. Will you marry me?" The auditorium froze. Workers craned forward, breathless. Clarissa felt her pulse thunder in her ears. She could see the sincerity in Leonard's face, the weight of his transformation. Yet she refused to let the moment become spectacle again. She leaned toward the microphone, her voice calm but sharp. "Answer me honestly, Leonard. Are you asking me to marry you to silence the tabloids? Or because you truly cannot imagine your life without me?" The hall hushed, every breath caught. Leonard's eyes shone with rawness. "Because I can't imagine my life without you," he whispered. Clarissa closed her eyes for a heartbeat, then opened them. "Then my answer is yes." The roar that followed shook the glass walls of the tower. Workers cheered, cried, clapped, their joy fierce and unashamed. For them, this was more than a love story. It was proof that invisible people could no longer be ignored. The wedding was set for spring, and New York had never seen such anticipation. The story of the housekeeper who humbled a millionaire had already gone global. Magazines in London, Paris, and Sao Paulo printed her photograph, some calling her Cinderella of Manhattan, others the barefoot ballerina who toppled an empire of arrogance. But behind the glittering headlines, Clarissa prepared quietly. She wanted the ceremony not to be a showcase for the elite, but a bridge between worlds. "If we're doing this," she told Leonard firmly one evening in his penthouse, "then everyone comes. Not just your investors and senators. Every janitor, every guard, every cafeteria worker who keeps your towers running." Leonard hesitated. The idea clashed with every instinct of the corporate aristocracy he had lived among. Yet the look in Clarissa's eyes was unyielding. "You're right," he said at last. "They built this as much as I did. They'll be there." When the day arrived, St. Patrick's Cathedral was filled not only with the powerful but also with the invisible. Housekeepers in their best Sunday dresses, guards in borrowed suits, cafeteria workers carrying flowers they had pooled money to buy. The pews mixed silk gowns with cotton shirts, designer heels with worn leather shoes. For once, there were no boundaries. Outside, however, a storm brewed. Across the avenue, protesters shouted into megaphones, "Gold digger! Manipulator!" Signs waved with tabloid headlines. At the center stood Caroline Farrer, Leonard's longtime rival in the development world. She had lost a multimillion-dollar contract months earlier, and had been whispering poison into the press ever since. Cameras flocked to her, eager for scandal. Inside, Clarissa stood before a mirror in a modest but elegant ivory gown. Her younger sister, Marina, adjusted the veil with trembling fingers. "You look like Mom would have wanted," she whispered. Clarissa smiled faintly, though her stomach was tight. She could hear the chants outside, muffled but relentless. Joanna Santos burst in, phone in hand. "They're live-streaming the protest," she said breathlessly. "Caroline's telling the world this is all a performance, that you dance your way into his fortune." Clarissa exhaled slowly, forcing calm. "Then we won't hide from it. Let the world watch. Today isn't about her." Moments later, the cathedral doors opened. Clarissa walked down the aisle alone, no father to give her away, no escort. It was her choice. Every step echoed not as surrender but as declaration. "I am not property to be handed over. I am choosing this." Leonard stood at the altar, and for the first time, his eyes glistened. He had faced hostile boards, hostile press, hostile markets, but never had his knees felt this weak. As she reached him, the crowd rose. It wasn't just respect, it was recognition. The priest spoke of transformation, of humility, of love born not from convenience but from struggle. Then came the vows. Leonard's voice broke as he said, "I promise to never again measure worth in money or power. You showed me the true wealth of dignity, of compassion. I vow to honor that in you, and in everyone we touch, for the rest of my life." Clarissa held his gaze steady. "You once humiliated me in front of 300 people," she said softly, so the whole cathedral could hear. "But then you humbled yourself in front of the same. I promise to hold you to the man you became that day. I vow to fight beside you, not beneath you. To remind you of the value of every unseen soul. And to love you, not for your fortune, but for your willingness to change." When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, applause erupted, not polite clapping but thunderous, tearful celebration. Guards cheered. Cleaners wept openly. The wealthy, stunned by the sincerity, joined in. Outside, the protesters' chants faltered as the bells rang. Supporters, hundreds of them, had gathered uninvited, chanting Clarissa's name, holding handmade signs. "Respect for all workers. She danced for us all." The jeers were drowned out by cheers. Caroline Farrer's face twisted in defeat as cameras turned away from her to the jubilant crowd. Later that evening, at the reception, Leonard guided Clarissa to the center of the hall. The band struck up. "Por una cabeza." Gasps rippled, the same tango that had begun everything. But this time, Clarissa was not alone, not mocked. Leonard took her hand awkwardly, nervous. She smiled, guiding him gently. Their steps were imperfect, hesitant, but together. The room erupted in applause, not for the precision of the dance but for its meaning. The woman once forced to prove herself barefoot on cold marble now danced as a bride, her dignity restored. Clarissa leaned close, whispering so only he could hear. 3 years ago, you dared me to dance for my worth. Tonight I dance because I already know it. And as the music swelled, she realized, this was not just her victory. It belonged to every invisible worker who had ever been unseen. 3 years passed after that night of vows, and the story that had begun with broken crystal glasses now belonged to history books and leadership seminars. Clarissa Zamper, no longer Foster, had become more than a viral headline. She was a force. Her foundation, seeded with the first 20,000 Leonard had grudgingly handed her, had grown into a national network. Branches in 10 states offered training programs for janitors, cafeteria workers, night guards, and domestic staff, people America rarely saw. Clarissa traveled from city to city, speaking not as a victim, not as a Cinderella, but as a woman who knew the cost of invisibility. The question, she told thousands of executives at conferences, is not whether your workers are competent. The question is whether you've ever looked long enough to notice. Leonard, once feared for his arrogance, became known for something else entirely, humility. Investors who once flinched at his volatility now praised his company's new culture. Staff turnover dropped to historic lows. Productivity soared. Zamper Enterprises appeared every year on the best places to work list, but for Leonard, the accolade that mattered most came from a janitor who once told him quietly, "You know my name now." At home, their life was both extraordinary and simple. They lived in a duplex overlooking Central Park, but the most sacred ritual wasn't the skyline view or the catered meals. It was the hour after dinner when they turned off their phones and sat together, just talking. About her lectures, about his projects, about Lucas, the 8-year-old boy they had adopted, who now raced through the apartment with schoolbooks and soccer cleats. One Friday evening, on the anniversary of the infamous gala, Clarissa and Leonard hosted a charity event in the very same hall where it had all begun. The chandeliers glittered as before, the marble floors gleamed, but the atmosphere was transformed. No one looked down on the service staff anymore. They were part of the celebration. Uniforms had been replaced with dignified attire, wages tripled, names learned. Clarissa took the microphone. 3 years ago, I stood in this room humiliated, a servant crawling on the floor to pick up shards of glass. Tonight, I stand here as the wife of a man who chose to change, and as the director of a foundation that has lifted thousands. This room is no longer a place of shame. It is a place of hope. The crowd rose to their feet, applause echoing against marble. In the corner, Leonard watched her with the same awe he had felt that first night she dared him to keep his word. He approached, placed an arm gently around her waist, and whispered, "Shall we?" The band struck the opening notes of Por una Cabeza. The room stilled. Clarissa slipped off her heels, laughing softly, and took her husband's hand. They danced, not with the crisp perfection of competition, but with the intimacy of two people who had chosen each other despite every barrier. Their son clapped wildly, shouting, "Go, Mom! Go, Dad!" When the music ended, the hall erupted into cheers. But for Clarissa, the true victory wasn't the applause, or even the love story that tabloids now celebrated instead of mocked. It was the sight of waiters laughing with senators, janitors sharing toasts with CEOs, guards taking photos beside investors. The hierarchy had collapsed, if only for one night, and that was enough. Later, as Leonard kissed her forehead under the glitter of confetti, Clarissa thought back to the girl who had once limped through the streets of Queens with nothing but a broken body and an envelope of bills. She had thought her life was over. But tonight she knew the truth. She hadn't lost her story. She had only been waiting for the right moment to dance it back into the world.